Howdy guys, it's Joe here talking about Shadowburn's Genji, a actual top 50 Genji. So if you want to know how to play Genji, you should be looking at this guy. I feel like a lot of people kind of think a lot when I make these videos about people like Genji that a lot of these players really aren't aggressive enough and aren't diving quite enough. But you can see quite a bit of aggression, but you can also see where they aren't dying all the time. If you see this guy, he barely dies this game, and he does really well. I, of course, love Shadowburn's Genji. It's one of the funnest things to watch, and while it's not 100% always balls to the walls offensive, it's very smart and calculated, and he does get a lot of kills when they're kills that he can just go out and get. Now, something that's a little bit funny is that right here, we see him just jump straight in there and die, just to opposite of what I just said, but for the most part, that doesn't really happen, and his team seemed to be winning that team fight anyway, so it wasn't, I guess, the most risky thing, even though it didn't turn out the best. Anyway, something that we see very often with this guy is simply knowing kind of where to be, and that's something that you see greatly from a lot of these top 500 players, top 50 players, or whatever. They're always looking around the map, they're always asking their teammates where people are at, or maybe even if they're not asking, they're at least listening to their teammates, and they're always trying to figure out where the enemies are at so they can know where to position. As you see, this guy's jumping all around, getting on the cart for a second, getting off of it, trying to shoot them. Right there we see a great idea by him, which is to not waste his ultimate. I feel like a lot of people would have done that, but there was no real reason to. He could just kill people and then save his ult for the next team fight. But yeah, he does kind of do that a lot, looks around and sees where people are at, and tries to go after them. And often when Genji's going after someone, your whole team can kind of know where to go. As well with this though, I would like to say, with his ultimate, he makes sure to know when to use it. He saves it quite a bit, and he doesn't immediately go for it just when he thinks that it might be an okay time to do it. He makes sure that he's using it correctly, which is something that a lot of people kind of waste. You could just try to ult and, solo ult people and jump in there before your team's ready. Like right now, some people I'd say probably would try to do that just because their ult's ready, so why not? But it's probably a better idea to wait a second, maybe try to get a pick now since one of their teammates is down, and then try to go in afterwards. They could go in right now, it's just a little bit unsafe. Right now, though, we see, he's just jumping around, trying to kill the opposite Genji. This is a thing you want to remember also. When the enemy Genji's ulting, or when you're ulting, they're still killable. I don't know where this comes from, but I feel like when Genji is ulting, nobody tries to shoot him. But remember this. He's still a 200 HP target that can still be headshot, that can still be hit, and he can only reflect once. So after that's down, he's essentially just a target that can jump around decently if he gets kills. But if he can't get kills, he's just like a regular Genji. You can kill him pretty easily. I want you guys to remember that when you're playing as Genji or against him. Right here, though, we see something great. Of course, comboing these ultimates, looking for who's in the back line, trying to get those guys straight up. Pretty simple right there. Finish it off and then try to escape the best he possibly can. Really nice thing right there was try to actually grab the wall and get away from the Roadhog with the wall, and it worked perfectly. So he didn't actually get hooked, even though he did go hooked, which was a little bit weird, but yeah, that did actually work somehow. Anyways, they continue pushing it up, and something you'll see a lot from these people is that, well, from a lot of top 500 games, is that a lot of the times the offense does really well and pushes all the way to the end, so you're going to see that a decent amount of times. Anyways, we see right here, he's just going after whoever he can, goes for the right clicks on tanks, and then, of course, often goes for left clicks at medium ranges or just on squishies. It's kind of weird. He does a lot more left clicks than I would normally see by a lot of other Genji players, and I'm guessing it's just preference. Or maybe it's also because you feel like you can land more headshots with left click, which I'm assuming that you probably can at a medium range, while at a very close range, right click might just be a little bit better. Anyways, with that said, we see right here, burst straight through the Winston. I feel like a lot of people have the misconception that Winston counters Genji. Genji can actually 1v1 Winston if his ultimate isn't up, if you just keep headshotting him, so it's not the best situation for Winston. While if you are a Winston player, what you can do to kind of counter Genji is put your barrier where the Genji is trying to assassinate people, because then the supports or whoever's in the back line, well, Genji can't really get to because they can just run in between the barrier, and Genji doesn't really have enough burst, or I guess enough consistent damage to take them out often. That's kind of where you counter him, but a lot of people just kind of run straight up to Genji, which can work. But if Genji is a support, or if he kind of knows what he's doing, or if he's just, happening to play really well, he can beat the Winston. So don't go way too ham. But as well as Genji, don't be way too afraid of Winston. Some people are just a little bit too afraid. Alright, there we see, of course, trying to snipe. Always going for headshots. There's no reason to really not do that with this character. Or at least go for neck shots. That's what I usually say is a good idea. Alright, there we see a great thing that he was doing. The Winston, he was getting a lot of supportive fire from his teammates. He drops down the bubble, and there's not much this Genji player can do. But we do the best thing possible, which is Shadowburn just trying to run away and stay alive for as long as humanly possible. Of course, reflects that right there, so that was pretty good. And we saw right there, of course, he's going for melee attacks. You can often make your burst do a lot more if you finish it off with a melee, of course, just 30 more, but since it is instant, there's no real reason to not do that. If you think that you might be able to get the kill, again, try to melee. Sometimes it won't work, and sometimes it might have been a better idea, to just keep shooting, but often it's worth the effort. Right here, he's running around through the back. Of course, he seems to pretty much always shift straight into the air, see who he can kill. Of course, it's not the most high DPS way to do it. If you do happen to see someone and that, you know, you're right behind a support and ready to kill them, you probably want to attack them and shift straight onto them to get extra damage. But if you don't know exactly where to go, or if you're going pretty far, of course, shifting up in the air is nice because it's very hard to kill with any projectile character. And that's kind of where you can play pretty well as Genji. If they're playing hit scan, they still can, of course, kill you, but often people will not look up. So if you shift up, while you aren't technically any more safe, really, I feel like you definitely are more safe from just the way different people happen to play the game. So that's a nice thing to keep in mind. Of course, right there, saving his E for quite a while. Just trying to make sure that he happens to make them reflect as much damage as possible for the ranges. Usually you can use it at close range, you know, to block stuff like a Reinhardt melee, which I thought that you couldn't, but yes, you definitely can. But yeah, you can do whatever the heck you want to do with that ability. Right now, he can pretty much essentially try to get the upper ground by himself, and then from there, if anyone tries to go in the upper ground, he can take them out. Right here, we see, of course, flanking straight behind them, trying to kill their Reinhardt, trying to kill whoever he possibly can. Of course, Reinhardt's a bit hard to kill, but he does really nice prioritization, goes after the soldier, realizes in that close range he probably won't be able to kill him, but he's able to follow him right here and realizes again, I probably shouldn't really follow him up way too much. This is the thing that you can see that's great about this player. He knows when to get out. Just a good rule of thumb is that if you think that you're probably going to die, but you might get a kill, you probably shouldn't do it. Of course, if you're having to overextend or anything like that. Often it's better for you to be in a better situation and then try to go and get the kill and try to help your team win than just trying to do it in a really bad situation just because it's going to come a little bit faster. Right there, of course, jumping into the backline again. There's that Lucio right there. When he can't happen to get to Lucio, he tries to go for the Winston. Fortunately, it doesn't work way too well, but the rest of his team does okay, so they can kind of stop the car a little bit. Right there, we see him trying to go after the Tracer the best he can. Unfortunately, has to get away again, and right here, he just decides to run away. Pretty good idea. I feel like some people might happen to chase after that Tracer. You probably shouldn't because there's all four of them. If you do happen to see a lot of people alive, you probably shouldn't go after them. And that's another thing I feel like a lot of people don't happen to do way too much. And right there, of course, we saw a great thing, which was that he right-clicked and got the 3-shot headshot on the soldier. You kind of just have to see how he aims that. It's a little bit awkward. And you kind of have to just practice a lot of Genji to figure out when do I want to left-click compared to when I want to right-click. Of course, the instant triple shuriken does have a slightly higher DPS, but if you can get 3 headshots, that's, of course, a little bit better. It really just comes with playing a lot of the character. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to say with that. As far as right there, though, you know, of course, you see this Tracer on the side. Could happen to go for her, but instead Shadowburn decides, you know, I can probably go after these backline supports. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen to get any, but still, having to push them back, so now their supports really can't do way too much. Sees this Lucio, gets him right there. I feel like a lot of Genjis have really hard troubles actually killing Lucio. You do have to make sure that you're really close range, or you get a lot of lucky headshots, but I'd say get really close range, right-click, shift straight onto him, and then right-click again. If you can get a headshot, you can kill him in 1 burst. Otherwise, you have to go for 2. And if you don't happen to kill him immediately and he's getting right next to a team, just run away. Don't sacrifice yourself to kill the Lucio. A lot of people do that, and while it's nice, it's often better to just run away, make sure that the Lucio can't really engage, and then make sure that, you know, you can come in later where you're actually alive instead of where you're dead. And that's generally what I'm going to say about Genji. You kind of have to be a little bit more defensive than you'd really always want to be. A lot of the times you'd want to over-engage a little bit and just overdo everything, overdo your combos, over everything. But you do kind of want to slow it down sometimes, think a little bit more about what you're doing, and then kill people like this. And still get a lot of good kills. But you see that it was very calculated. His team was all ready. He saw that the soldier was upstairs, so there's a really easy pick and very, very safe. And then they could pick off everyone else and push them back. It was a really cool play, very, very fast, but still a lot more calculated than a lot of people, I'd say, would traditionally try to do. As well, we don't always see Genji just plain ulting into the entire enemy team. It does work pretty well, pretty often. But if they have anybody that's actually really, really, really good at aiming, it can become hard because, again, they can still kind of counter you. And of course, if there's a Winston, it doesn't matter as much, but he still can get through you pretty quickly. Right now, they also have a weird, like, triple tank comp, which isn't the best thing in the world for Genji. And as you see, Genji really can't focus way too much on the tanks. You do have some problems. But what he is doing is, you know, forcing the Tracer off of his DPS and essentially his supports for the most part, forcing the soldier to death or off again to those same characters. And while he isn't particularly pushing back all the tanks because you really can't way too well as this character, if you kill all the people that are the lifeline for the tanks, you're gonna really kill the tanks. If the supports are gone, as a tank main myself, you can't do much. You essentially just gonna die right there. We see him right here jump to the back, try to get that person. Unfortunately, get visored, but whatever. And we see them right here, you know, pushing as far as they possibly can. Sees again this guy happen to shoot him with a left click, and then gets right here up next to this tracer right here, and just kind of stalls for as much time as possible. Something that you can make sure to do is shift up into the air right next to the cart, and then land straight on it and try to stall for as much time as possible. We see this right here again and again. They're trying to eventually just jump on the cart. Unfortunately, get hammered down, then the enemies get all the way through it. But as you see, we have a lot more time on Shadowburn side than on the other side. 56 seconds compared to 5 minutes. So you can see that it's a little bit better for us. As well, you can see that defense is a little bit harder to do than offense. Of course, with defense, you do have to be a lot more patient than I'd say with offense. You have to focus a lot more on picks, and you really can't, like, ultra win a lot of your team fights immediately. And you can't really blow your ultimate immediately as well. I feel like a lot of people do that. And since your ultimate is so important on defense, and so since you have so little chances really to stop them, because, you know, if they happen to get one push out of their, like, 50 chances, and you're screwed, it's a little bit harder. Right here, though, we see something that's nice about him, which is you can just, again, dive behind the tanks and take other supports. And if the tanks are either dead or just not ready or just not really close enough, you can take them out pretty easily. Some people, I feel like, underappreciate Genji on defense. Well, I'd say personally that I'm definitely not as good on Genji on defense, and I feel like most people aren't. It's not something that's terrible. It is definitely a lot different. You do have to be very weirdly mobile and really a little bit stally, and it might be something that's maybe not the best for everybody, but it does work pretty well. So, you know, if you want to try to give it a go, I'd say definitely try it out. I'd say it's even a little bit better in some cases than Hanzo on defense. You know, maybe a bit controversial, but I don't know. That's at least my own opinion. Right here, though, we see this Winston. We could try to get close up and try to kill him, which I feel like some people would do. But, of course, Shadowburn realizes there's this soldier right here visoring. If I go any closer, I'm probably going to die. So he stays back, even though we could have gotten that kill on Winston. Right here, they're just trying to stop as much as they possibly can. The Genji doesn't have healing, while, of course, the Winston does. Pretty much means that you can't win that 1v1 in any situation. I want to remember that. And right here we see him getting height advantage, which can either stop the opponents from getting height advantage, or can allow him to get a lot of cheeky kills from above, get quite a few headshot shurikens a lot easier, and then finish it off from there. Right there, of course, just simply pressing E around the corner. That's a thing that's very simple, but something that can honestly kind of just make so that they're going to kill themselves quite often, especially if they have a Roadhog. So something that's really not way too risky, but that can do you pretty well. And especially if you're about to ultimate, there's no real reason not to just go for your E. As if you don't, you're just going to have your E for later in your ult, which might be useful, but especially versus these people's comp with someone like a Winston, it doesn't really matter way too much, because you can't really reflect way too much after that initial burst anyway. Anyways, they're off to the final offense, though, and they have a Zarya now, so that can be really nice. Zarya Winston, and I think that they might have a Reinhardt. I'm not actually sure. I'm not be able to see the comp right now. But yeah, Zarya Winston with a Genji. This is a total dive comp. They are on first point, so they might want to play a little bit. Well, they only have to push 1 point, I mean, so they can really play quite a bit more offensive. They want to just try to get a singular push and just ball straight through them, and even if it takes them a few tries, that's really okay. You know, you don't have to be way too safe, as a lot of people try to do in the other times, and if you do happen to get that initial push, you just win. So I'd say that's definitely when dive comp's even better, and of course right now dive comp's a really good comp. There's nothing way too much that counters it too much, and especially in Korea and all these places where we see like triple DPS dive comps with 1 Winston and then 2 supports, people like Genji and Tracer. Yeah, it works really well. Fortunately, got countered a little bit right there, but we see that we have so much more time from the first push that it doesn't matter way too much. Trying to poke as much as we can onto that Winston. Got shot by someone like a soldier. I don't really know exactly. But he probably does want to get into that backline. Fortunately, somebody got picked on his team again, so they have to wait a little bit. Just kind of have to do that when that happens. But if we can happen to get a pick, the Tracer will be able to come here much faster. So even if Tracer's down, you still do have a slight advantage, especially on offense. Our ultimate right now is Shadowburn is almost up, so we can try to get to the enemy backline. If the enemy team happens to engage on our team right here, then we can just jump straight to their backline. Maybe try to get a bit damage before. Going with this Winston, as you see right here, slice straight through them. And there we go. We got 2 of them dead right now. And since they don't have a Mercy, there's not really way too much to worry about. Left clicking right here, which I guess does a little bit less damage, but I don't really know. It doesn't really matter. And then finally finishing off this guy with right click, trying to get that D.Va as fast as humanly possible, but unfortunately doesn't work out because D.Va was just kind of lucky right there. And then we have this other Winston just picking him off. Another can kind of push up a little bit. I would always say keep 3 people on the cart, but do try to push up just a bit if you possibly can. It can often give you a few 1 to 2 seconds that can win you the game. I think a lot of people just 6-man sit on the cart, that's not always going to work. While pushing up a little bit does work, but make sure not to push up like 5 miles. Some people go like really close to the enemy spawn. That's not a good place to push up. Anyways, thank you all for watching. That's all I'm going to say about this guy. I feel like he's a really, really good player. And you saw he only died like 2 or 3 times in that entire game on this very hyper-offensive, very strong, very playmaking character. So I'd like for you to think about that and think about all the cool stuff that he did and all the ways that he was playing to stay defensive while still getting a lot of kills and still carrying his team quite a bit. Well, still not dying, so he could always have a really high impact. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and have a wonderful day.